My grandpa was a huge, huge role model.
He's just one of those guys that everyone loves, but the grandkids really love. It wasn't like he ever did anything spectacular or magical, but he was there. He was there and he loved them.
When they got to come up on their mission and they were called here to Utah in the Family History Library, and it was kind of a 9-to-5 gig. They could come to all the games. They got to see all the sports, which my dad loved watching sports. He'd be in heaven watching them right now.
My dad had called all the kids into the living room. That's when I was like, oh man, okay, this is, I don't know what it is, but it's something serious is going on. He just said, hey, Grandpa's been feeling pretty sick lately. They went to the hospital and he's got cancer, stage 4 lymphoma.
He was up at Huntsman at the Cancer Institute and kind of in and out, of being released almost, get home, couple days, be back. And so there was never a process where he really kind of got out of the hospital from that point on. So yeah, it was pretty sudden. And to make the decision that he had to make, which was he had the options of you're gonna die in a month, a very terrible and painful death, or you just stop dialysis and over 3 days you're gonna drift off. And that's what he chose to do.
I feel like I was just learning how to have a relationship with God and what that actually meant, to pray to him and to feel like you're receiving answers and kind of learning for the first time, like how to do that. And I remember just kneeling down and just praying, probably the hardest I'd ever prayed, and just asking for a miracle that he would be okay because our family needed him here. I got an overwhelming feeling and sensation that he would be okay and that he would live. I remember distinctly, probably one of the only times in my life where I feel like I've had a prayer answered that way, maybe the only time. And I remember just feeling such a profound sense of peace and that I could go out there and I could face my grandpa and there were no tears, because I knew that God had just told me he was gonna be okay. And I went to bed that night with a smile on my face, and then I woke up and he was dead. And that that was hard. That was hard. Probably for the first time in my life that I felt like God really spoke to me. And in that moment, the next day of realizing he was gone, the only realization I could come to was that I must have come up with those feelings on my own and that it was fake. It wasn't real. It's like all this stuff, all this time I spent trying to learn how God answers prayers, it didn't work.
I mean, Connor, he kept it pretty reserved. We really didn't know how much he was struggling. I think because he was busy and he was doing football and he was doing basketball and he was doing baseball and he was student and his social, I don't know that we picked up on any cues.
It's like I was still going to church because that's what our family did. We went to church. And it's not that I hated church. I didn't necessarily like it after this moment because I hear all these people telling all these stories about how much God has helped them. And in my mind, I'm sitting in the chair that dude abandoned me. So, I don't really care about your story. I became pretty bitter. There was a new guy moved into the ward, and he was assigned to be an advisor in the young men's group that I was in. Gosh, I hated his guts at first. He was pestering me all the time about mutual, about my life, and trying to be my friend.
You work all this time, and it is a very thankless job. You spend a lot of time in the trenches with these boys, and you have no idea if they're even listening to you. You don't necessarily know where that train's gonna take that kid because he gets to choose that. That's the beauty of this whole system, right?
I started to notice, the faith he had in the Savior. All right, I'm not super big on that whole thing right now. I get that it's working for you, but maybe there's some other way that I can still, be like this guy without having to go back into that realm that I already know without a doubt isn't real. And so I tried to like snake around like there's gotta be a different way. Why this guy's like this? And so slowly started saying prayers again, kind of working my way back into things. And all of a sudden I started to feel myself starting to form a relationship with God again. It kind of just started to blossom from there, and then kind of grew throughout my senior year leading up to mission papers. And I'd heard so many people say, like, even if you don't really know 100% how you feel or what you know is true, what better way to find out than to go and serve a mission? You're gonna discover one of two things. Either it's real or it's not. So go find out.
He is a spiritual giant, and I do give him that title not just because of his size. I think his spirit's larger than his size, probably triple. He's just really my hero.
I think about that a lot, like why would I have gotten that feeling? I think in some ways I still don't know fully. Maybe God just knew that I was gonna be very hard-headed and stubborn and opinionated, and I needed something like that to get me to this point now.
Even though that was hard for him, that was probably one of the best things that could have ever happened to him. And would I want my father-in-law to pass away for that to happen? But I know if he were sitting here today, he would be cheering Connor on, and he'd be like, way to go. You did it. You worked through this hard thing.
When you see your own child who's going through some stuff, to say, I'm going to turn to the Savior as my solace, as my comfort. He's done great things with his life, and it makes me happy to watch that, and I know how great things going forward, and he'll be a great father someday.
There's gonna come a time where you're gonna be backed up against a wall and you have to figure out what you believe. Whether or not God is real, whether or not he loves you, whether or not he had a son who suffered and died for you. When you're in the deepest, darkest, most miserable times of your life, that's when a testimony, a real testimony of the atonement of Jesus Christ is born. Because that's the only time you feel in the teeniest, tiniest little way, just a sliver of what Christ felt for you. And I had to go through that, and it sucked. But I know without a shadow of a doubt now that he's there and he's real and he loves me and he's there for me. And I love him.